informal board call, and we are joined, it's my great pleasure to say, by our incoming Chief Executive as of next Monday, Martin Tugwell. So welcome, Martin, to observing this meeting, and we look forward to working with you in your new guise from next week. I think it's appropriate at that point for me also just to put on record, and I know I'll have the board's support for this, the excellent work that Tim Wood has done over the last 3 months as interim CEO, building on an outstanding record and a continuing record as our continuing NPR director. But Tim, it's never easy to take on an interim role while you're filling the shoes that Martin will be about to fill. But you've done a really good job, and you've really kept the board's mandate very much to the fore of our work through quite a challenging time. And thank you for doing that, Tim. You have the board's thanks.
Thank you, John. That's much appreciated.
And I don't have a full list of attendance. It's always quite complicated with a board of this size and a digital meeting, knowing just who is with us. So forgive me if I don't mention somebody for whom this is a first meeting, but I know that the Department for Transport's representative today is Simon Connick, who is known to many of us, who is the Deputy Director for the North. And Simon, you're very welcome. Let me move on to declarations of interest. Is there anything anybody wishes to record for this meeting? Thank you very much, colleagues. So moving then to the minutes of our informal board call on the 9th of June, where we discussed a governance report related to a new chair in part, finance report, preparations for the spending review, substantive item on Great British Railways, and a substantive item on the Manchester Recovery Task Force, and an update item on NPR. Now, given this isn't a formal board meeting, we're not formally approving the minutes, but I think it's prudent to keep these minutes on a rolling basis as up to date as possible. So is there anything from the minutes anybody wishes to pick up on, not covered elsewhere on our agenda today? Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. So we move to item, Louise, please, Louise.
Chair, I wondered if we could bring item 10 to the beginning of the meeting, which is about Northern Powerhouse Rail, but in particular about the delayed IRP. Only because I'm conscious some people don't stay for the whole meeting, and I think everything sort of falls out of that. I wondered whether we should have that discussion first.
I think that's a very sensible proposal, Louise. Thank you for that. It was at the end of the agenda because we were unsure as we were formulating the agenda papers just how much time we would need and what we would have to say. I'm supportive of Louise's suggestion. Can I just take a rain check from board members? That doesn't compromise anybody if we take that item. Well, a very good suggestion, Louise. So then let's take item 10 next, and I'll come then to Tim Wood, who was always going to say a few words about this item. Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. The paper before you provides an update for members on the implications of a further delay to the publication of the government's integrated rail plan on Northern Powerhouse Rail programme. Members will recall that the Department for Transport requested the completion and the submission of the strategic outline case for Northern Powerhouse Rail be delayed until after the integrated rail plan has been published. The IRP was expected by the end of 2020. And it will now not be published until at least after the 6th of September 2021. It is possible that the IRP could be considered as part of the government's spending review and could be pushed back towards the end of the year. The timings remain very much uncertain. We believe that the earliest possible point at which the strategic outline case could be submitted would be March 2022, but it could be much later, and this would be dependent on the scale of difference between the IRP and the base assumptions about the networks and phasing. But in any case, finalising the SOC within 6 to 12 months from the date of the IRP publication would necessitate an abridged process and rapid mobilisation. And in the worst case possible, the SOC would be completed within 18 months of the IRP publication. The extent to which this might delay the move forward towards detailed design and construction will depend on the precise timing of the IRP and its contents. If the IRP confirms government direction and agrees to progress towards ongoing development of the programme, together with a funding commitment, then it would effectively serve the same purpose as the SOC. And if the IRP sets a clear strategic direction for the MPR network and a timeline for delivery, then delay to the SOC need not result in a delay to levelling up the north. But there are a lot of ifs and buts. On the other hand, if the IRP extends towards the end of the year and further work is to be done, then our ambition here in the north is to start construction still in the middle of the decade. It could start to slip away from us. And of course, the IRP might see the NPR being completed later than we hoped. We're hearing often that the government are committed to NPR and to levelling up. So this further delay to the IRP and the much needed clarity it will bring, hopefully, is really unhelpful at the moment. So what's next for NPR? Well, of course, we continue to make progress on implementing the agreed work scope for the financial year 21-22 and the model development. We'll work with our co-client to mitigate delays to the programme as far as possible. In addition to delay in finalising the strategic outline case, the NPR team estimates that delay of the IRP until November might result in around a £5 million shortfall against the committed budget. But this is, of course, sort of very dependent to the exact timings and substance of what is in the IRP itself. The budget implications will be summarised in the budget revision paper, which of course will be brought forward to the board now in November. So I'm just going to stop there, John, and I'd like to continue on and talk about the Manchester Recovery Task Force work, but I'd just like to take any questions if there are any from the board.
Yeah, so I see a couple of hands up. I think the first hands up was Matthew Lamb, and after Matthew's spoken, a second hand I saw was Hans Mundry. So Matthew first, please.
Hi, John. Actually, that was a mistake.
No worries at all, Matthew, not at all. Hans Mundry then, and after Hans, I'll come to Tracy.
Okay, thanks, John. I just had a few observations about this situation, because we've in the north we've been determined for a long time now what's the best possible rail network to serve the whole north. And I know there's been two in and goings and compromises along the way, but we've sort of got to an understanding of what the needs are to make the north productive and benefiting to the. Sorry, I think I've got an echo that on. And to make our visions for the north actually materialise, but more and more it seems to be being dictated to by the Treasury and what they can afford for the north to happen. And I think they could come on the situation of conflict between the two, what the needs are and what they can actually afford to be paid, or what money is available. So I think we need to have early discussions with our ministers, particularly the rail ministers, to see what they can do to make sure the major or priority points for the north are actually funded properly. With the levelling up, I've sort of got concerns with this, because if you've not got the funds to invest in the north, how can you possibly level up? So I'm going to leave that in abeyance, but that's a thought in the back of my mind with that one. And I think we seem to be coming into a situation where it's the needs of the north, and then in contrast with the amount of funds the Treasury can afford to pay. And I think we need to have a meeting at some point to sort of thrash that out. Once we know what funds are available, then still talk to us to say what compromise we can come up with once we know how much funds is on the table.
Thank you, Hans. That's very wise counsel. And you know, we read the tea leaves, don't we? And we study the media coverage. We seem to have a continuing problem that's been there from the beginning of the integrated rail plan about the cost overruns from HS2 phase 1, which are having a knock-on implication for the overall funding envelope for HS2 phase 2B, but also, of course, most importantly for us, even more importantly for us, NPR. And it shouldn't be an either or, but it feels like the tension between those two is becoming a problem. Now, I have a number of hands, as I would expect, on this, so I'll take them in the order that they've come up. So first of all, to hand the floor to Tracy Babin, and then I'll hand it to Mark Ralston. Tracy.
Thank you, John. And if I could take this opportunity to thank you for your service, leading us at TFN. So thank you, and to welcome new leadership going forward. Obviously, it's hugely dispiriting. We know as part of our letter, one of our expected outcomes that was the IRP would be published in July. That's obviously being kicked back. Is it going to be in November in the spending review? How then does that roll out for our community? And unfortunately, this is part of a wider impact for us in West Yorkshire, because we've also had rumours about HS2 now going on to the red list, and that could impact on Leeds City region to a tune of 1.7 billion shortfall every year that goes by. That's what we're losing. And then connected to that northern powerhouse rail that we absolutely need for Bradford. And then you've got the eastern rail line and the changes in the timetable there. It just feels like we're being left to wither on the vine. We can't just wait for action from government. I suppose my request to the board is, what can we do to implement and start works to try and make these connections for ourselves? Because unfortunately, as every week goes by, waiting for these plans, waiting for leadership from government, we are potentially losing investment from international investors who want to take the best stuff from West Yorkshire, our skills, our businesses, our opportunities, but they see that lack of interconnected transport as a real barrier. And it's really frustrating that we're having to wait. So what can we do across the region to set things in train so that we at least can see some activity to start making our own case for that connectivity? Because we can't just continue to wait. We don't know if this is going to be kicked into next year. There will be other priorities in the spending review. It's really urgent, and we must make that powerful case to government that this is fundamental to levelling up. Our transport network is fundamental to us punching not above our weight, but delivering what we can for our region. So just wanted to express my frustration at this delay, and whatever pressure we can put on government to make sure it's not delayed further. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And clearly, when we've taken all the comments, and I see six hands up so far, that we'll pull together what more, if anything, we can do. So I'll come to Mark Ralston, and after Mark, I'll give the floor to Andy Burnham. Mark.
Okay, thank you, Chair. On our earlier LEP call, we did discuss actually how the voice of business could be used much more strongly to support the active voices of the politicians, just to reinforce the importance of NPR in the IRP in terms of generating economic outputs here. And I think we agreed that Tim, as chair, would produce a draft letter that could be amended by all the LEP chairs, that could be sent via the NP11 and the chair of the NP11 and all of the individual businesses as part of the LEP networks, so that we could try and raise the voice of business in this argument to supplement the important work of the politicians here. So I just really, a reminder for Tim really is an action point to produce something that we could all use to adapt in our own individual ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think the voice of the N11 is of really great importance in this area. And of course, we also have a good ally in the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, which can supplement the leadership of the N11. Let me come to Andy, and after Andy, I'll come to Dan Jarvis, please. Andy.
Thanks very much, John. And it is linked, of course, to the Manchester Recovery Task Force that I think Tim is going to come on to speak to. So I will want to come in again on that. But I don't want to repeat everything that everyone said. I just strongly agree with the way Tracy put it. And I was really pleased to hear what Mark just said, John, about the business voice coming together here, because it is 7 years since we were promised transformational rail investment in the north of England. It's 7 years ago. And it's hard for us sometimes to keep saying to our own residents, yes, it's coming and we believe in it, if it isn't. And I think we're hitting a point here where it's getting very messy and it's getting very worrying, in that the mood music is not at all good. It feels as though we're being kept in the dark so that suboptimal solutions can be forced on us without time to challenge them, debate them. That's how it feels. It feels like we're going to have a suboptimal network imposed upon us at some point. So there won't be NPR. Effectively, we'll have some form of HS2 with TransPennine upgrade. I mean, that is obviously a very different position to the one that we were promised, and very different to the vision upon which the Northern Powerhouse was based in the first place, which was that the cities of the North need pulling together in a much more connected rail system, so that we can punch our weight as a region internationally. So this is very serious. I am very worried about where things have reached. I have further concerns about the Manchester Recovery Task Force. All I would say is, in the 7 years since George Osborne came to central Manchester to promise us a northern powerhouse, which everyone supported and everyone still does, I see no evidence of significant rail investment committed to solve out the rail network in the north of England. And yet we grapple with the problems all the time as a board as to what that means. And the question is, how much longer do we carry on in that way before becoming more outspoken and challenge what we think is happening to the north? Because this is a pretty serious breach of trust if we are about to be sold a much reduced vision of what we were originally promised. And I have become increasingly worried about the failure to produce the IRP and what that means for us long term. So I will want to come back in, John, on the Manchester issue specifically, but it's the danger always is it looks like we raise these points to grandstand. I don't think we are, and I was encouraged by what Mark said. This is not about politics. If the government was to stick with it, the big vision, even though we would be prepared to make compromises, of course we would, then that would be one thing, but it doesn't sound like that is where it is heading. We are being forced into a corner here where, as ever, the North will be told, well, there's no money left. We spent it in the South. You're now going to have to make unacceptable compromises that go way beyond what any of us would want to make. I think our residents expect us to challenge that in the most forthright terms that we can, and that's why I agree with what everyone else has said on this call so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and I'll bring you back in when we move on to the Manchester Task Force in the second half of this item. Let me bring in Dan now, and after Dan has spoken, I'll bring in Darren Hale from Hull. Dan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I just really want to echo the concerns that have been very clearly articulated by others. I mean, like Andy Burnham, I am deeply concerned at the situation that we find ourselves in. We have to be absolutely clear about the fact that the delay in the publication of the Integrated Rail Plan is having hugely significant impact on our ability to take forward the plans that we've developed and nurtured over the past few years for unlocking the real economic potential of the north of England through investment in our transport infrastructure. We also have to be honest about the fact that the continued delay to publish this work is having huge uncertainty, on the communities that we represent. It's creating a very significant problem for our business community in terms of investor confidence. And I completely agree with what Mark was just saying a moment ago about the importance of the voice of business in all of this. And the reality is that now and for too long, we find ourselves in an invidious position where we're not able at a local level to take the decisions that we need to take about investments that we want to make at a sub-regional level, because we simply don't have the clarity that the integrated rail plan will deliver when it is eventually published. And we need that as a matter of urgency. We would need it in the good times, but at this particular moment, as we seek to rebuild, as we emerge from the huge impact that the coronavirus pandemic has had on us, and at a point at which the government has made a commitment to level up the north of England, this is precisely the moment that we need the clarity that this plan will deliver, and we don't have it. So I think we have to be clear and speak with one voice to government that it simply isn't good enough, and they need to provide us that clarity as a matter of urgency so we can get on and do the work that we all know needs to be done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dan. Can I now come to Darren Hale, and then I'll turn to Jamie Driscoll.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. I think in echoing the concerns of colleagues, I'm sort of concerned. I mean, it was back in the early spring, wasn't it, when the Minister, Chris Heaton-Harris, was saying, do you remember when he jokingly said that Parliament works to different seasons and that spring can last till about September? Do you remember him saying that? And I mean, we would be quite happy with September, wouldn't we? I think the way things are going, but I fear it's not even going to be September, is it? So the real concern is obviously representing Hull and the area where obviously the upgrades were, as I've said many times before, cheaper and more simpler than lots of the major engineering projects. We're probably missing out both ends up, because by, you know, we'd have probably got there on some sort of maintenance program at some point at this rate before the IRP looks like it's going to get published. But obviously that was not the point. The point was to be part, as Andy said, a collection of northern authorities, you know, acting as a bulwark and a potential rival powerhouse to the dynamo of the south, you know, London and the southeast. And we're falling further behind. But the bigger issue for me, and I don't know whether Tim might want to come back on some of these points, was I mean, yesterday we sat, you know, in our local smaller council approving, you know, £11 million overspends on 2 capital projects, which were running 40% ahead of budget because of the increased prices of steel, civils and labour, which is, I'm sure, something that across all those authorities we're all facing. So I can't understand how these delays make it any more affordable. I can only see it making it less and less affordable the longer they delay, because certainly, you know, we were faced with steel prices going up 15% in the last 3 weeks on a couple of our schemes. So unless Tim's got a very good supply and has bulk bought in advance, which he can't have done, I'm sure that this is going to, in many ways, this delay and this sort of game of footsie clearly between the DfT and the Treasury is making this project less affordable as this delay carries on. And I think that's the point that I'd like to get across back to government in our feedback, was that we know those issues we're all facing in the economy, you know, in the wider economy locally that are facing us all. And this is really not helping. And actually, it's making it, as I say, less likely that we're going to get our aspirational transformation of the North, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. Can I come to Jamie? And then I think it may be the last hand. After that, I'll come to Louise.
Thank you, John. It's HS2, even in its current iteration, the widest plan isn't going to reach the northeast. It stops at York. The worry that it's not even going to reach the north at all really has honestly, I'm wondering, is the IRP being written by Samuel Beckett? Because it's like waiting for Godot, isn't it? We're in this position where it's affecting everything. So Tracy, when she was opening, she was saying the wider issues. We've got a constriction at the moment in the northeast already. We're not just talking about losing out on future investment, where we are having train services taken off because of a decision made 7 or 8 years ago on the basis that there would be investment to increase capacity. So that's why now LNER, at the time Virgin Trains East Coast, were given rights to open a new service, 3 an hour, but it means that we're now losing direct connections to the northwest, which is the whole point of transport for the north. Mark's point on business is well taken. We held a meeting with everybody together, all of the business organisations. See, Lucy's on the call, the local left, the universities, myself, Martin's on the call, and spoke to government and transport infrastructures commissions and saying how important this is to us. We couldn't have been clearer. And for this not to be coming through when in November we have the world's eyes on us for COP, and this is about public transport and low carbon transport, is really quite worrying. And those of us who've been around long enough, which I would imagine is everybody on this call, tend to know that when people aren't saying anything, it's not good news. Governments trail, leak, hint, re-announce if it's good news over and over again. When they're keeping quiet, it's not good news. So I think something just drawing out of Hans's earlier suggestion, we have, to be fair, the Department for Transport ministers, I think, are some of the best ministers for engagement, certainly in my experience, compared to some other government ministers. And we have a very collegiate cross-party way of working in the northeast. Across the north, I think it's very good. But the relationships have to cut both ways. So I'll be interested in the board's opinion. Rather than at NTAC, hearing from the ministers and saying, oh, I'm sorry, it's up to Treasury, and then various things that come out. How about that they turn up and look us in the eye and justify why this thing is so late and give us a commitment that it is going to be delivered, albeit late, at least sometime this year. So that's, let's not call it a proposal, but I'll be interested if we do invite them to a meeting to speak to us, where it's a lot harder to just dismiss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And you raise a very important point. Andy already referred to the Manchester Recovery Task Force. TfN, as we know, is extremely on the ball and busy about the East Coast Main Line consultation, which has major implications for connectivity across from the northeast to the northwest, but also a diminution of service for passengers in the northeast. And very serious implications. I'm going to come to Louise, and then I think my final speaker is Councillor Charles Edwards. Louise.
Thanks, John. I don't want to repeat what everybody said, but I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think Jamie's idea of meeting with the minister to try and find out the truth, I think, you know, at least if we know, we can sort of move forward from there. I'd be interested, trying to be positive about this and say it does come forward in September. I know it's going to then take quite a few months before we can start doing any of our work. And I just wondered, is there anything that we could be getting on with? Some of the surveys, looking at some of the work that we could do, because there may well be some costs that we could identify that would help the government reduce their overall package. And I think, you know, if we could do something from our perspective, that would be really good, but I'm not really sure what we're allowed to do and what we need to get permission from DFT to do. So I don't know if Tim can help with that one.
So really good point, Louise, and without stealing Tim's thunder, and I'll come back to Tim as interim CEO to respond to all the comments made. Looking at the work that's been done in the last 3 months, not only have we very forcefully put on the table that transformational vision that Mark Ralston and Andy Burnham were talking about, and the risk of delay that Tracy and others were talking about. But the work by the TfN team, the NPR team, continues at pace to take cost out of this by challenging the cost assumptions we are receiving from our industry partners and driving down the cost. And I'm sure Tim will come back to important conversations he's had with the Treasury, seeking to demonstrate directly to the Treasury, where I think the issues are now sitting, that TfN has both a transformational but also a cost-effective solution. I'm going to bring in Charles Edwards. I don't see any more hands up, but James can correct me on that. After Charles has spoken, I'll then hand the floor back to Tim, and we'll sum up where we've got to on this one before moving on to Manchester Task Force. Charles Edwards, please.
Thank you very much, John, and congratulations for the work you've done. Hello, everybody. My name's Charlie Edwards, and I'm the new representative for Lancashire. I'm looking forward to meeting and working with you all.
Welcome.
I absolutely agree with all the comments that have been made so far, and I think that it is a real slap in the face, the fact that we're having to have this delay again. When we were on the Rail North Committee last week, whenever it was, we made a commitment to, we agreed, didn't we, that we would only accept the changes to the timetable if we laid out five caveats that we sent to government, and the number one was we want the IRP published as soon as possible. And within a matter of days, that's not happened, and then it's almost made the rest of what we asked for completely redundant. And it's just really frustrating. And I echo the comments that have been made so far, and I look forward to the meeting with the Minister about this. I'd just like to make a really small point, which is that the point that was made about affordability is key, and not just about transport projects, but in terms of all of the big projects that we're putting together from a levelling up perspective as well. So I'd like to know, have we got an update on the proposed changes that were announced last year about the Green Book, and how they were going to make changes to the Green Book, and it was going to make it easier to justify investment in the north? Where are we with that? That is the question I'd like to have answered, and I think that would improve our offering as well. So that's what I'd like to know. Where are we up to with that, and if that could be communicated to the Treasury as quickly as possible, that'd be helpful. Look forward to meeting you all in person. Thank you.
Indeed, yes, we look forward to that day. Okay, on that note then, Tim, what would be your response to the points made, and can you tell us a bit more about the work you and the team have been doing to make the transformational cost-effective case?
No, thank you, John, and thank you for all your comments. I think the first thing I come back and say is all the colours are aligned. That is the most important thing, I think, as a key message here. Also, when we talk about the business community, you know, the business community needs to be absolutely out there thumping that drum to say, this is business for our companies, this is business for other parts of the north of England, as well as the rest of the UK. It is a major project, this, to open up the connectivity across the north of England. So when you think about what have we just been through, well, we've been through probably the most awful pandemic that anybody's known. And I think we just need to acknowledge that and say that must be affecting some affordability. But ultimately, it should not just be the north of England that has that effect. The rest of the UK will have that effect as well. But we've been really promoting in NPR, what can we still get on with quickly that would not affect the IRP? And there are certain examples. As Louise said, we can do some more survey work. We've just surveyed currently between Hull and Leeds. We had a £300 million worth of civil engineering work there. We think there's a substantial reduction to that workload that needs to be done, purely being born out of the survey. So we'd really want to get on with Sheffield to Hull as the next one. It's a single option. We know where we're going there. I think the stations as well, both at Rotherham and Barnsley, there are no regrets. We can get on with them. Start our survey, design and development work and get those stations in. So when we look at the IRP as well, it's not just the north that's been affected. Midlands Connect, they can't move. They're absolutely in a straitjacket as well, and very much a clamour there to get the IRP out. But not receiving the IRP at the moment is not stopping our workload. We still have 70% of our spend secured through the agreement of non-nugatory work with the IRP. We are on with that at the moment, and that's circa around about £48 million. That also affects Manchester Recovery Task Force as well. Again, that is not dependent on receiving the IRP for the first tranches of work. So importantly, to see that document, and I would suggest We're probably not going to be overjoyed with it when it arrives because it will probably be related to the amount of spend that we can do. But let's get the base case out of that. We can then start to build in the north of England incrementally to actually end up with getting that full capacity into the network. So moving on as well from the conversation, I think we always said we wanted to get spades in the ground in 24-25. Hull to Leeds is still possible to start that programme of work. We're in a good space there. As I've said, we've done the surveys. We can look to move into design and into delivery, and we have driven those costs down. We are known within the department as a real challenging force. So where we currently sit is £42 billion for the members' preferred network. We think we can take at least a further £5 billion off that. And we think there's more to go as well. And I would suggest that a government that's really hungry to get on with schemes is really going to see what we have done in the north, how we've challenged those numbers, how we've moved on in agreement with Network Rail on some of those numbers. And I think proof in the pudding is actually to unleash us now, to let us get on with some of these projects. Because when you look at the cost profiles, you look at materials, we think 2022 they will still carry on going up. We think we've got, of course, inflation as well, eating away at that. So the longer we wait, the more the costs will go up. But in actual fact, we're not really in that position. We're in a position that, as I said, we can be unleashed now, starting the design, starting the development, and then starting the build. We are not looking in the north of England for billions of pounds of investment. We are looking in the hundreds of millions of pounds worth of investment for the first 5 years of NPR to actually get on with that. The bigger money comes towards the end of the decade, and of course our development work around there to really hone down the overall numbers. But it's a programme that is in control, that understands its finances, that is just waiting for government now to release further monies to be able to get on with the scheme. So that's where we are, John, at the moment. We are having to wait, but there are certainly large amounts of pockets of work that we can get on with now. And I think for us, the more the politicians work with the government and actually the minister and really drive that hard message home that major investment in the north of England is on standby, but it's not going to be on standby for the next X years. It's going to move on to somewhere else. And the reason the constraint is purely around that transport and that connectivity piece. So until we get that released, we are basically going to remain in a straitjacket in the north of England here. And I think we've been very clear what we can achieve in terms of the growth of the £14.4 billion per annum by 2060, those extra jobs, and of course, bringing in the decarbonisation piece. Electric trains mean one thing, 1% greenhouse gases. All those fossil fuel burning vehicles and those lorries are generating 22% greenhouse gases across the north of England every year. So we need to get on with this in a spirited way, and let's start to see the colour of the money and investment in the north of England here, because we are ready to go and raring to go. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Tim. Well, notwithstanding the deep frustration, which is very evident from this conversation, we've actually had a very rich 40 minutes. There's an awful lot of really powerful points made by board members, and quite a clarion call for action and a consistent message of continuing action in our own gift from Tim as our interim CEO. Just summing it up, I mean, I don't want to lose any of the rich points that were made, Louise and others, that I know Tim has taken away and will work on with Martin. But I thought there were three themes there, two of substance and then a theme of delivery. The first one was in making the case for transformational investment, where we've heard in recent weeks from a number of council leaders and metro mayors. We need to reinforce that, and Mark Ralston's suggestion, by an even more impactful messaging from the business community in all its guises, but led by our LEP colleagues on the board. I think that is a really powerful point, because it puts the government under that little bit more pressure, because it reinforces this is ultimately about jobs and living standards and transformation. So it's an extra arrow in our bow, and thank you, Mark, for the work you're doing within the LEP community to take that forward. Secondly, I think we need to further reinforce the argument that Tracy led, which is about the downside impacts of further delay, the paralysis on investment choices, and the paralysis, as Dan said, on aspects of city region investment that need to be taken forward in the context of NPR across the north and HS2 phase 2 in the north. And I think the downside effects, reinforced by Darren in his points about cost escalation, are really powerful points which we could bring more to the fore. And then I just wanted to end with Jamie Driscoll's proposal. Yes, we are waiting, and it's others who have to take those decisions, and we can't do a lot of action until we have those decisions. But Jamie's proposal that we seek an early meeting with ministers to keep the momentum of this moving forward to the best of our ability and get a dialogue that has been slightly lacking over the last few weeks, I think is a powerful one. So there's lots of points that Tim made, and I know Martin was noting and nodding to, that we can take forward that will further strengthen the evidence base and the quality of our arguments. But I think the business input, the impact of delay, and Jamie's proposal that we seek a summit with ministers are points I would suggest the board should pursue. Can I just see if board members feel that we've summed that up accurately? Tim in substance and me just with the overall gloss. I'll just take some thumbs up. Yeah, okay. Tim, do you want to move on to the Manchester task force, and then I'll bring Andy back in as well?
Yeah, thank you very much, John. So following a special Rail North committee meeting where we were asked to endorse the task force recommendations for the timetable changes from December 2022, I wrote to the Rail Minister setting out our conditions for endorsing those changes. Put simply, whilst members recognise the need to provide the industry with a clear planning assumption to develop a reliable timetable, they were not prepared to sign up to the connectivity reductions, including links to Manchester Airport, without reassurances from ministers that the infrastructure investment will be made to allow services and connectivity to be reinstated. A copy of the letter and the 5 conditions was circulated to members. We are still awaiting a response from the minister, but we've been told it's imminent. So we look forward to receiving that, and of course we'll circulate once we've disseminated the information. So we've already discussed the IRP, which was the first condition. In parallel, TfN officers have continued to develop a much more collaborative approach with the DfT, getting us more sort of inside the tent. And I'm really pleased to report that we've made some good progress. We had a really positive hothouse session with department officials where we set out how we can work together using TfN's evidence-based models to make the strongest possible strategic case to unlock the money to get the right solutions through the corridor. And as part of this, as we drill down on the Castlefield corridor, which is in the main the sort of source of congestion and essential to unlocking the restoration and expansion of services, we're making progress on ensuring that the necessary assessment and analysis of all options, including platforms 15, 16 at Piccadilly, are on the table. There's a key workshop this Friday with TfN and TFGM will be attending, and we'll follow up with a further hothouse with the Department for Transport. The right combination of infrastructure and services won't be finalised overnight, and it's important that TfN stays inside that tent using our evidence-based models to really make that case. We've had some good progress, as I talked about. On the direct links between Sheffield, so South Yorkshire and the airport, the Rail North Partnership have been working hard with the train operators on ways of retaining some form of that link. So Rail North Partnership is in active discussions with the train operators, including an early and a late through links direct from South Yorkshire into the airport, and we're going to have an update to that next week. On the Cross Warrington links, we worked hard to get the task force to develop some alternatives, more acceptable proposals, which they've presented to stakeholders, and now we're just waiting feedback. So, of course, following on from where we are at the moment, I think it's important that we get that response back from the Minister as soon as possible. We work through that, and then we make sure that every single stone has been unturned where the opportunities are to put these services back in early. We've always called for no timetable change in May next year for the Northwest. And of course, we remain in a position of no timetable change on the eastern side, and particularly the East Coast main line. We do not want to lose that existing service that we have at the moment, or other services that will clearly be affected up the East Coast main line. We think there is more work to be done there, and we want to collaborate again with the department and with the train operating companies to see our way through, so that actually we can have a betterment of the general services across the north of England. But I think ultimately it boils down to one thing. We only have a twin track railway up here in the north of England. We are not able to overtake the slow trains and freight trains, and you need to build the capacity in. It will not happen overnight, but I think we need to be very clear on what that plan looks like and the immediate pinch points to be worked on first as a sense of criticality, and then build out from there. All I see happening is that, and we did predict this, the north of England, passengers are moving back onto the trains quicker than anywhere else. We could end up with a situation quite soon where we still have a COVID timetable, which is around 80% of the services pre-COVID running, and us as commuters standing up on those trains again, and standing up for a long time. That's why that investment's needed. And the other caveat for me as well that's really, really important, the fare box, of course, has really struggled because, of course, people haven't been using the trains. So I think our commitment from the north is, government, you support the investment in the rail infrastructure here, and more people will move out of their cars and onto the trains because they know they're going to get a service. Well, it turns up on time, it arrives at a destination on time, you'll get yourself a seat, and it's actually a seamless journey. So quid pro quo, investment in the railways, the fare box, of course, will increase, and that's what we need to see. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Tim, for getting TfN into the tent on this unresolved work on the Manchester Recovery Task Force, but at least we're there coming up with sensible solutions. And thanks also for the alertness of TfN working with Mayor Driscoll and others to ensure that the really important issues arising from the East Coast Main Line timetable consultation are being properly addressed with a strong voice from the north, but particularly from the northeast of England. Let me bring Andy Burnham back in. Andy, if you're available to pick up on the Manchester issues. Andy. Andy, I think you may be muted.
You might want to go to Dan first.
Just while we're waiting for Andy's availability, can I bring Dan Jarvis in? Dan, your hand was up as well.
Thanks, Chair. I hope that Big Brother is not muting Andy. I think that was a really helpful update from Tim. I'm really pleased to hear about the work looking at potentially being able to reinstate in some form the direct link to Manchester Airport from Sheffield. That's encouraging, and we'll keenly await progress of that work. I think clearly where we are is we're now waiting on a response from DfT to the letter that we sent them following the recent Rail North Committee meeting. I think we reasonably drew together the conditions that we require in order to have the peace of mind to be able to endorse the work that's fallen from the Manchester Recovery Task Force. This is a hugely significant issue for us right across the north, so we need to get this right. We need to get the assurances from government that the transport infrastructure that we want to see will be invested in. And therefore, what I would suggest, and I'm sure that we're going to do this anyway, is as soon as a response is received from government, that is shared amongst board members, and quickly thereafter, we're given the opportunity to convene to discuss how we can respond to their response. So I think that's all I wanted to say, but thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Dan, I'm sure that's what will happen. Tim has been particularly effective, if you'll allow me to say so, in getting these notes quickly into ministers and feedback quickly to the board. So we will continue that. Let me now bring in Tracy, please, and then Hans Mundry. Tracy.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Tim, for that extensive feedback. You just a very quick point about LNER. You mentioned there's more work that needs to be done. I know this is a particular problem for Jamie Driscoll, but it's also a problem for us that we have one train a day going to London from Bradford. So if you could loop me into those conversations, I'd be enormously grateful to support Jamie as well in whatever outcomes you're hearing from government. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tracy. Big issues for West Yorkshire on that East Coast consultation. Let me bring in Hans Mundry, please.
Yes, thanks, John. I've very pleased with what Tim had to say. Really good piece of work being done there, and setting out the needs, particularly to try and go over this difficult situation. What we're looking at from Warrington is that everybody's losing in this. There's no winners. There's no levelling up. It's definitely taking one, if not a few steps backwards. What we really need to know is how long is this going to be for? That's where the timescales for the infrastructure improvements are important to be put in place. Not just that they're going to be done, but actually give us dates and times. So we're going to have to suffer and put up with a substandard or poor service, but for how long is what we need to know. How long is this going to take place? So we do need the infrastructures, which we've outlined, but we also need to say a timescale or dates when they're going to be done, which we can hold people to account for. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Hans. I'm going to bring in Heather Scott and then come back, I think, to Andy Burnham. Heather.
Well, thanks, John. It's just really following on from what Tracy said about the LNER and the timetable, obviously the effect that also has on Darlington and the Tees Valley. Obviously, we are responding separately, but I think it would be good to be kept in the loop and obviously confirm everything that Jamie's saying. You know, north of York, it's an absolute disaster for us, and the trains that we're actually losing, you know, in Darlington as well. So just to be kept in the loop, John. Thank you.
Thank you. You're absolutely right, Heather. We have issues right the way across to links to the northwest, but we have issues for Bradford and West Yorkshire. We have issues for Darlington and Durham. We have issues even up here in Berwick. It's a real loss of passenger benefit because of those infrastructure constraints and very decisions that were initiated well before the levelling up agenda and indeed our own programme of investments. Andy Burnham. Andy.
Thanks, Chair. Not sure what was going wrong before. So I'm grateful to Tim. Clearly there's a lot of hard work going on. I'll just have to be honest, John, and say I'm not reassured. And it actually goes back to the previous conversation. We're just not getting clarity. And it feels as though we're being fobbed off. I want to bring this board's attention back to the fact that we resolved to advise the Secretary of State in January 2000 that we needed the Package C works because of all of the in-depth work we had done on the chaos of May 18, and we were absolutely clear as a board that we needed a package of works called Package C. And ever since, there's just been dragging of feet. Oh no, there's a better solution. It doesn't involve Piccadilly. You can do it by going to the junctions outside. I mean, we've just been fobbed off completely, I'm afraid. And we're in a situation now where there's a new collaborative approach that's hot housing solutions. Well, that makes me less reassured because it just says they haven't been listening. And I'm not convinced at all by that. Also, I think it's disappointing. We've had no reply to our letter that we sent. So the question is, John, what do we do about it? I don't have, I'm afraid, the faith left in this at the moment to say that we just carry on and hope this new collaborative approach will work. Hans Mundry put it very well. We need dates, we need commitments, or I think we are letting our residents down because we're giving them a reduced timetable with no exit route from it. And I don't think we should do that, particularly given that this issue goes back many, many, many years. It predates pretty much everyone on this board. It was long, it used to be called the Northern Hub if you go back, way back in time. It was recognised that Manchester needed to be reconfigured to support reliable rail services across the north of England. And the department have repeatedly dragged their feet. Now, John, it gets a little more serious in that news emerged at the weekend, and it's not just a press report. I think this was based on documentation from the Office of the Road and Rail Regulator, that the Control 6 period budget has been cut again. So it was originally 10.4 billion for the period, which goes between now and the middle of this decade. It was reduced by $1 billion, I think, last year, and now there's a further cut of 500 million. So the budget is shrinking before our eyes. There was meant to be an enhancements pipeline published before the parliamentary recess. It wasn't. So in these circumstances, we sent a letter, we haven't had a reply, we were clear in our conditions. I think we have to follow through the logic of our letter, which is at this meeting, make it clear that we are refusing to give support to the reduced timetable that will be coming in December 2022, because we have no assurance at all on how long that reduced timetable will last, because there's been a failure by the government to commit to the infrastructure improvements needed to support the enhanced timetable we were initially promised. And the tranche 1 works, even if they're going to be in this pipeline, they are not enough to fix the problem. And we all should be absolutely clear about that. So I would propose that now is the point where we formally withdraw our support for the reduced December 22 timetable. Otherwise, we're just not going to be heard, and we're just going to be fobbed off in this collaborative process that never comes to an answer. And I'm sorry, but my patience has now run out on this.
I can absolutely understand that, Andy. And of course, you and I, along with many other members of the board, lived through the 2018 timetable debacle, where these fundamental problems in the Castlefield corridor played a significant contribution to the inability of the industry to respond to the anguish that passengers were suffering. Heather, I'm just checking, your hand is still up. Is that a historic hand?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I did desperately try to take it down.
No worries. I didn't want to close you out.
Thank you.
I'm going to come in a moment to Tim Wood to respond directly to the proposal from Andy Burnham, but I see Dan Jarvis's hand up. Dan, is this also on the same point?
I don't believe my hand is up, and if it's showing.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I thought
it's Mayor Jamie Driscoll.
Mayor Driscoll. I apologise, Jamie.
No problem. My hand looks very much like Dan's hand. Yeah.
Indeed. Jamie, your hand.
Very briefly, because I've spoken at this at length at the Rail North and earlier in the meeting, but just to support Andy's suggestion that you can write to ministers, but unless we actually take action that gets publicly reported, it's unlikely to have much effect. Otherwise, we would have had an answer by now.
So thank you, Jamie. Tim, your letter following the RNC meeting was very clear that without the commitments that we were seeking, the board and the North were unable to support the timetable changes. Andy has put forward the view, supported by Jamie, that he feels we're at that point. Obviously, you are pressing very strongly for the ministerial response to your letter, and we'll circulate that, and I presume convene the Rail North Committee or a group of members as soon as we have that response. But how do you respond to Andy's particular proposal that without the commitments we're looking for, this board cannot support the change to the timetable?
I think there's two things I want to say. First of all, I have literally had the letter drop in my inbox as we've all been speaking. So we're going to circulate that around everybody. The one thing that is really important, I think, to talk about here is, although we want to move absolutely out of the COVID timetable, that is not a helpful timetable as we rapidly start to move on towards the trains and get the system working back again as it should be. We just need to be minded that the timetable change B+, which still needs to be consulted on yet with the wider audience, it does improve the betterment of the timetable that we have today. And if we hold out in terms of saying it's either we get all our answers or we don't accept the B+ timetable, I think my concern is that we definitely need to move away from the current COVID timetable we've got. So what I suggest is we will circulate the letter. I think we should just pause on that decision as a chief exec point of view, and we will convene a Rail North committee meeting as soon as we possibly can with as many people in the room as possible. But I just want to disseminate that letter in detail, and then we can have that further discussion and debate and open that up. So I would hope that is agreeable with the board.
So I'm just going to take a further set of comments from members. Allow me as chairman to say, I think what Tim has just proposed is very consistent with what Andy's proposed, in the sense of saying we have a clear position that we are not going to move from. We need to see where the government is moving towards us, and it may be that the best way to proceed is for a small group of leading members to work with Tim and Martin just to play the cards. But I think the sentiment is very much where Andy and Jamie was, that our patience is at an end. It's just literally how we deliver that board mandate that I think Tim wisely is saying, let's just do that following the meeting. But I have Tracy, and then I think I this time do have Dan, and then Andy, and then we'll agree a board mandate. Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. And what a fantastic coincidence that the response has landed just this minute as we were discussing it. It's terrific. Is there any chance, Chair, just because we're all convened, it would make sense to maybe for Tim to cast his eye over the letter to see if there is any expression of interest from the government to go along with some of our suggestions? It just means that we could discuss this now while we're all gathered and have an opportunity to then potentially decide on next steps rather than moving it further down into the calendar when, of course, it's the summer and people will be on their annual break and it could end up being in the autumn. So just my impatience as a new leader, John, so you'll have to forgive me.
No, not at all, Tracy. You make a very wise point. So I suspect that Tim is digesting this urgent late news as we speak, and I'll come back to him in a moment to see whether he can give us an initial view of whether the letter is good news or not. Andy, please.
Well, John, I was just going to make the similar point to Tracy. I'd be grateful if we could have the letter circulated straight away now, and then defer this discussion to the end of the agenda, so we can have a chance to read the letter and then pass a view. I mean, Tracy's right. Many of us will be away next week. You know, this is the last chance to discuss this before we get into the autumn. I mean, others may have a different view than me, but I would rather grasp the nettle now rather than constantly kicking the can down the road, to be honest with you. It is absolutely within the department's gift, the minister's gift, to say they are going to prioritise Manchester Castlefield improvements and give us a date. And if the letter doesn't say that, you know, then as I say, I would want to withdraw support for the timetable and make it clear that this is our position. But you know, obviously, I appreciate others may have a different view. Would like to allow more time. I'd like at least have a discussion, having read the letter, and then we can all sort of read it as the meeting is progressing, and then come back to it in the last 10 minutes, if that's agreeable to you, Chair.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring in Dan Jarvis, and then I'm going to make a proposal from the chair. Dan.
Well, thank you very much. Really, just to agree with what Tracy and Andy have just said, this is an urgent matter and we need sight of the letter as an absolute priority. So we'd be really grateful if that could be circulated. But I think Andy's absolutely right. We can't risk any further delay. This is a matter that we have to attend to as an urgent priority, and therefore I think we'd all be grateful for the opportunity to digest the contents as quickly as we're possibly able to do so, and then pass comment on it where we feel that's appropriate collectively as the board. So agree with what's just been proposed by Andy and Tracy.
Okay, so Tim, my proposal from the chair is that you circulate the letter now to board members. And if you wish to give us a headline view as to what you think the letter's telling us, feel free to do so at this point, but circulate the letter. And then I'll come back to this item towards the end of the meeting when we've done the other business we need to get through. Is that acceptable to you, Tim?
That's absolutely fine, John. Just a very quick heads up, not much talking about the conditionality pieces, no mention of the IRP, and basically a summing up at the end of the paper, at the end of the letter, which basically says, I need you to agree on what the solution should be. I believe there are two options: agree option B plus, whilst continuing to work with the industry on the final public consultation to be run later this year, or stick with the current COVID timetable into the medium term. To ensure any change can come on time, I need to know which option you have chosen by the 6th of August.
Okay, so I think that all reinforces Tracy's suggestion. So I've asked Maria to circulate the letter now, Tim, and in that, I'm sure you've done the same, and in that way, members can multi-skill, if we're able to do that. We'll read the letter whilst continuing with the agenda, and then before the close of the meeting, we'll have a further reflection on the Manchester Recovery Task Force and what our position is. Because if they need a reply by the 6th, then as Tracy, Dan and Andy have said, this is our last opportunity to take a view. Okay, so the letter's coming round, look out for it. But if you'll allow me, I'll now revert to item 4, and we will as speedily but effectively as possible do the governance business that we need to tackle, and then we'll come back to this item. Is that okay, Tim?
Fine, John, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a flexible meeting, as we're seeing, but none the worse for that. Okay, so the governance report, it's not a decision-making meeting, but it keeps us up to speed with important matters of governance. And I'm just going to hand the floor briefly, please, to Julie Openshaw, the monitoring officer. Julie. Do we have Julie Openshaw? Not sure we do.
She is on the call, Chairman, but
thank you.
Seems muted. Bear with me 1 second.
So just while we're getting hold of Julie, you've read the paper. It notes the interim arrangements for the chair, which will proceed at the end of this meeting, where I'll hand over to Louise Gittings as acting chair. It asks you to endorse the work of the member working group in establishing a general purposes committee and saying how that would be constituted, and that you authorise the group alongside our business capabilities director to work with Martin on his objectives, and that you support the proposal from the working group for amendments to the Constitution to allow subsequent meetings to have remote participation for those unable to travel when we move back to physical meetings, remembering that sadly those people would not be able to vote, but if we change the Constitution they would otherwise be fully participating members. There's a point about a new member to come to the audit committee, which would come to the September meeting, and then just the sensible proposal that we continue to be careful in future physical meetings and use large enough council chambers in order that we can have appropriate social distancing given we're in public meetings. So just checking whether we have Julie. If not, I think I've done what she would have done, in which case I'll look to members for any responses. And given the pressure on the agenda and the fact this isn't a decision-making item, let me take comments in aggregate on the governance paper. So I'm just looking at hands up. Matthew Lamb, I see your hand is up. Matthew.
John, I'm not keeping doing this. I'm having some IT problems. Every time I click on a button, it's clicking up the hand. So I do apologise. It's not me. I'll make sure.
No worries. That's
Thank
quite
you.
all right. Good to have you with us, and sorry you're having problems. Peter Kennan, please.
Thanks, Chair. I was on the members working group, so I'm very happy with all. I just think that the ability to meet in a hybrid fashion at the chair's discretion is really useful, because it could enable us to more often in all parts of the north better demonstrate the One North credential. So it's very difficult to move away from Manchester and Leeds because of pressure on time. All the groupings might just give us that opportunity.
Thank you very much. And whilst you have the floor, Peter, can I just check you are comfortable with the addition of a LEP rep to the General Purposes Committee, which is an addition to the original membership proposals?
Yes, I'm happy, and it's been suggested that the LEP representatives, the 11 LEPs, nominate someone to that position.
Thank you very much. On that basis, then, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Are colleagues comfortable with the governance report? Thumbs up. Yes, thank you very much, Heather, Lucy. Right, we will move on then. Thank you. The budget revision paper I'm going to take as read. We have a very good paper from my colleague Ian Craven, our finance director. It shows we're 0.7 million below budget, which I don't think is material at this point, and the proposal is to stick to a net budget of 60.18 million for the year, as you will have seen. Obviously a reduction in the gross budget, which is mainly to do with the NPR contingency, which clearly wouldn't be utilised given the delays in the IRP. And Ian is rightly pointing us to uncertainty about the budget, which is consistent, as you would expect, with Tim's observations about the uncertainty about our NPR spend in this financial year. Does anybody want to make any comment on the budget revision 1?
John, it's Keith Little. Just as Vice Chair, I would support the paper.
Thank you, Keith. That's really important to have that support from the Vice Chair there. And what we're asked to do on the paper is note the report, which is very helpful and full report, and the modest variance within it. But it's quite early in the year, given the uncertainty we have to do any more than that. But I think it's a prudent piece of reporting. Everyone comfortable with that? We will note the report then. Thank you very much. We then move to the spending review. And on the spending review, we have a very helpful paper from Tim Foster. And what that paper does is note that we are still in a period of uncertainty. You will have read it. There are various options for a timetable, but we're not clear as to what that timetable will be. But the office, as you would expect, is taking all appropriate action to ensure that we can put in a spending submission for transformational investment in the autumn as soon as we're clear how the process will work. Are there any comments on the spending review paper? Thank you very much. Are we okay to note that, please? Thank you very much. Thumbs up from Jamie Driscoll and others. Appreciate that. We'll now move to the freight strategy. Now, this, of course, we discussed at the Partnership Board and had some great enthusiasm for, and we're now at the point of hopefully moving to public consultation. And I think at the same meeting we discussed, the Partnership Board discussed the freight strategy, we discussed the decarbonisation strategy. They're two sides of the same coin, and the decarbonisation strategy has done us a lot of good, I think, and is getting considerable traction. So I hope this would also be true of the freight strategy. But given the importance of this piece of work, it's an excellent example of evidence-based staff work by the team. I am going to ask the principal officer who's been leading this, Lucy Hudson, to say a few words about her draft report. Lucy.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for that opportunity. So I think I've got two things to draw out over and above the report that you've received and the work that you've read. The first thing is this is going to be sort of an organic flowing version of the freight and logistics strategy for a couple of reasons. The first reason is the decarbonisation plan has only just come out, and a lot of the comments from your officers and your colleagues in different authorities have focused on the decarbonisation element. So I need to make sure that's fully strengthened, and then look at the objectives and recommendations, and really make sure they're focused and targeted in that sort of zero carbon and decarbonisation lens. And also balanced against the rail and the highway, and there's just those nuances really need to be drawn out. So that's the first thing. I'm also, some of you may have had a bit of feedback from your officers that some of the comments that they may have submitted, it may not be as evident in the draft that you've seen. There's a number of reasons for this, mainly that I got COVID, so it's kind of hampered my ability to weave some of those things in. But I will say, and with utmost confidence, all the stuff that has been submitted are really good points. There are lots of them are like highlighting areas of infrastructure that you can just draw out more. So a lot on those kind of themes, and they're really good points. So they're all going to get listened to. So when we move to the consultation version, they'll all be in there. And then the last thing is about the interventions. Now we had Tim Foster and I discussed whether I should put the freight interventions into the strategy and be very clear on that have been released in the TfN investment programme, but also through some work Network Rail done on the north of England route studies and that kind of thing. And because of the IRP, we weren't overly certain about what to do, so I left them out. But they definitely will go back in because they're interventions that we've already agreed, so they can go back in, and then we can just discuss those throughout the consultation. So they're my 2 points. I hope I've been as quickly and as brief as I can. But if I'm back to you, John, for freight.
Well, spot on as usual, Lucy, and I'm sorry to hear you've had COVID, and our best wishes for your continuing recovery. And I know you'll catch up with any work which understandably you weren't able to do. Thanks for your diligence. So this is the draft freight strategy. The proposal is that we now publish it in the autumn for consultation. Any comments from members above and beyond what we previously discussed at the Partnership Board? Peter Kennan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to first thank Lucy and colleagues. It's an excellent document. Clearly, a lot of work's gone into it. Could I ask that before it goes out to consultation, that there is some dialogue with the LEP colleagues? Note at 319 of the paper that it's been consulted with officers that really haven't had the business input in. So any LEP colleagues that want to contribute directly, it's helpful. In that respect, I have got a meeting. I just wanted to comment, you asked us to focus on the recommendations at a call on Friday with LEP colleagues. And when I do that, I noticed some things in there where we talk about congestion of infrastructure, but we don't really tie it into the conversations we've been having this morning, for example, because we haven't got a freight railway and a passenger railway. We've just got a railway, and Castlefield isn't mentioned as a key bottleneck. The Hope Valley line isn't mentioned, where we have 31 freight trains a day now competing for space on very congested infrastructure. So I just think maybe we need to tie it into the other priorities that we've been talking about, and not just decarbonisation.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that's a really good point. There's a lot we've done in the technical work that we did with Atkins. There's a lot of evidence about the congestion point, so I can draw that out.
Thank you, and I'm sure you'll pick up on Peter's reminder that as well as working with officers, parallel work with LEPs is of great value added here. Heather, please. Heather Scott.
Thank you, John. It's just really I don't know whether you're aware, but there are a group of Northern MPs, and I understand the leader of Leeds Council and Nottinghamshire, just saying how important the HS2 eastern leg is for freight transport in the future. So I just think that's something that we need to add to this. We've got bottlenecks all over the place, and I think that that's important if we're really serious about the future for freight transport.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for that point. Any further points? Okay, can I put it to the board then that we welcome this report from Lucy, and it received plaudits from Peter, which I'm sure we share, and that we approve the publication of the draft strategy. Can I have your agreement for that? Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on then to item 8. Again, we'll take this report largely for note because it's an update item, very helpfully from Tim Foster, on the Northern Transport Charter. And the two particular things we're looking at are the high-level activities, which are listed in paragraph 5.3, viz. Citizens Assembly, Independent Advisory Group, and a Northern Appraisal Framework, amongst others. And then the comms and engagement strategy, which was circulated as an annex. Does anybody want to say anything about the Northern Transport Charter? Okay, I'm not seeing. Oh, Peter, yes, please, Peter.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I have been making some comments. Assembly. How it would work. There's a big difference between a citizens' assembly or panel between local community assemblies and regional ones. The problem IT and knowledge, where people may have knowledge of local transport but much less knowledge about regional matters. So I am concerned about the cost against the benefit of that proposal, and I think it would be helpful to have a little bit more information about what benefits we think we will really see out of this against the cost. And I'm very conscious about budget constraints, and if it doesn't work, what fingers will be pointed at TfN?
Okay, you were breaking up a little there in your early comments, but I think we caught the spirit of what you were saying as you concluded. So I'll bring Tim Foster in on this in a moment. I think I have Jamie Driscoll, please. Jamie.
Hey, finally unmuted. I just note in the report it mentions the North Tyne Citizens Assembly, and I think that's something that Peter was alluding to. Like you say, John, it did break up a little bit. It's worth noting that a Citizens Assembly is substantially different from a standing advisory committee. Citizens Assemblies work when you give them a specific question, and it was remarkable how a randomly stratified sample, it was everything from young people in the city to farmers in Northumberland, were able, when advised, to consider complex problems, come up with very reasonable and pragmatic solutions that were radical at the same time in terms of wanting to get on and see things done. So that's the real benefit of a Citizens Assembly. And it cost us £80,000. So it's not necessarily for me to say whether that's expensive or not, but you can get an awful lot out of these things, and it is very good to be able to say we have consulted in massive depth with the people and they were fully informed, and this is what they say. So there is merit in Citizens Assembly as an approach, but it does require an oversight panel that sets the terms of reference and the question.
Thank you, Jamie. That really scopes it very well, and it's the flip side of Peter's point that if we're going to do this, we would need to do it very well. It is a complex exercise, but has great potential benefit if we can get it right. If there are no further comments, I'll bring Tim Foster in on this particular point. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to add on the Citizens Assembly and panel proposals, Absolutely. I think that the initial work that we've done has really pointed to the range of options and approaches that are out there, and we know this has been tested across the north. But absolutely, I think the effectiveness of it and how we apply it to the work of TFN, both in determining short-term priorities and thinking about the longer term, it has a huge amount of potential. But only if we design and deliver it in the right way. So what we're proposing to do, in line with the business plan that the board's already agreed, is to work with the member working group on the Northern Transport Charter to design a pilot approach that will both help us sort of work through those tricky issues and also give the board some assurance that this is a longer term value proposition for TFN. So that's the next step in this process. But we did want to bring it to board, given that it's a potentially complicated area for us to be moving into.
Thank you very much, Tim. Peter, let me just give you the right of reply. You've heard Tim's reassurance that the board would receive further assurance through the working group before this went forward. On that basis, is it something you and the LEPs could support?
I hope you can hear me now, Chair.
Yeah.
That's good before. Thank you. Yes, I could support it. I just need that reassurance.
Understood.
That we're going to get the benefits out of it, so that we can't have a finger pointed at us for wasting cost and time. Thank you.
Understood. So I'm going to propose then that the recommendations in paragraph 7 be brought to the board, that the high level activities be approved subject to further reassurance that we can do the Citizens Assembly work as well as it deserves to be done. And secondly, that we agree the comms and engagement strategy that was attached. Are colleagues comfortable with that? Can I have thumbs up from the board? Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Andy, Heather. That's really helpful. I'm now going to move then to item 9, which is station accessibility. And this is another item alongside the freight strategy where I thought we should just do more than note this report. We should just spend a few moments on it, because it's such an important issue for passengers across the north of England. And for that reason, I was going to ask our TFN colleague, David Worsley, to say a few words about station accessibility. David.
Okay, hello everyone. I'll just briefly summarise the report then. We noted that we were successful in getting £60 million worth of station investment written into the franchises from December 2015. And some of this was spent on accessibility improvements, though I think a lot went on things like platform extensions as well. So there was a feeling that there's a long way to go in making accessibility acceptable at the stations in the north. Since I first wrote this report, we have received a bit more information from Northern on what their current facilities are, and we're just looking at that at the moment. But the area we have the clearest information on is step-free access. And only about half of the stations that Northern or TPE call at have step-free access to all areas of the station at present. And even for some of those, such as Menston's a good example, actually the step-free route to one platform is very, very long, and it's not really providing equal step-free access. Meanwhile, for about 8% of the 543 stations we have data on, there's no step-free access at all, and the appendix shows that includes a few busy urban stations as well, such as Levenshulme and so on, or it did when those figures were compiled. So overall, we think there's about 250 stations that require significant work just from the point of view of step-free access. Now, the Access for All programme in the latest control period only funded 15 stations in the north to be addressed. So you can do the math yourself, as they say. That's 3 a year, and it would take us the rest of the century to bring the stations in the north up to an acceptable standard, just from that one point of view of accessibility. So what we're proposing here is actually to take a three-pronged approach to try to improve accessibility. First of all, we want to use the evidence we've now got in our own tools, such as norms and all the data in there about how how many people use the stations for what purpose and how they access the stations, to identify those at which there's a strong business case for trying to make a bit of an echo here. Still there. Which is a strong business case for improving station facilities. The second prong of the three-pronged approach is to also share that data with our partners and help support their projects for improving station facilities. And the third prong is to continue using the Access for All fund for stations we can't get a business case for, using those two other routes. So overall, using these three approaches and packaging together different types of station facility improvement to get the strongest possible case, we think we can maximise investment in the stations in the north. But we've already talked to external groups such as Disability Rights UK about what they want, and they've reminded us that there is a wider accessibility agenda that includes things such as consistency of policies between different industry organisations, station TANI announcements, making them clearer, how you pay for tickets, and so on, so that there are no artificial barriers erected to people using the railway. And this is a wider accessibility agenda that we intend on looking at as part of this strategic case as well. And that's all I wanted to say about it.
Chairman, you're on mute.
I put myself on mute to try and reduce the echo and then forgot to take myself off. So I was just saying thank you, David, for a very interesting paper. I'm now going to bring in Steve Curl first, and after Steve, I will bring in Darren Hale. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome it, and it's a good approach. I think it's focused on value for money economic benefits. Now, our concern is whether or not we should do a wider assessment, perhaps as advocated in the Green Book referred to earlier. So I'd first want to ask the TfN executive if they can assure the board that the value for money assessment considers a full range of considerations, including not only access to all the environmental benefits and so on. And secondly, I know that Haven was the one rural example forward as a pilot. Whitehaven's a pretty good station for access. At this point, I'd like to use an advanced visual. Here's an example, if you can, of a station access, 41 steps on the lever to get to the platform. So I'd like to invite the board to endorse the view that we should look for stations which have no bandwidth whatsoever in their accessibility, other than for fit and healthy younger people, and certainly not carrying luggage or tools or products. So I think we should have a vision on beyond the red list, if you will, applications which quite literally have no access and should be given the highest improvement. I think it's unacceptable to have things of this sort, and there are many of
them. Thank you very much, Steve. We are seeing increasing echo issues and breakup. So I would suggest if anybody's on the call who is not muted, because they please mute, because that can reduce it. And if there are unnecessary people on the call, only in the sense that they're not contributing, maybe one or two people might just want to close off cameras. We're obviously using up our bandwidth. Can I move now to Darren Hale? And after Darren, I will come to Heather Scott. Darren.
Yeah, 3 or 4 points, John. Firstly, obviously, I welcome the report. It's a very good report from David. And I think the issue for me was that whilst I see step-free access as absolutely crucial, I'm pleased that he finished his comments by making it clear that that was, we needed to make sure that the strategy covered a wider set of potential disadvantages for people with limited mobility or disabilities. I was like the last colleague, Steve, I was just a bit concerned about the you know, the economics of it, because when we talk about, you know, potential footfall and that footfall at certain stations, well, I'm sure that will be very much altered and affected by people's ability to access a train at those said stations, because you're not going to go there if you know you can't get on. It's the same traditionally on the underground, isn't it? When we used to go there, you know, as a Londoner, that people went to the stations to get what they can get off at. The real concern I wanted to just raise on the secondary point was that I think we also need to be absolutely clear that the rail companies are and the station operators are completely wedded into disability groups, local authorities, and ourselves when they make alterations to stations, because we've only got one station within the whole boundary, as I've told you before, and GPE shut off one of the gates, and it took, you know, because of ASB issues and revenue control issues or whatever. So, and we had to get a large petition up on the Transport for the North intervention to reopen a gate. So where there was accessibility, sometimes the rail companies and the operators use other devices to limit accessibility, as we know, either via gating, either via gates and alterations and diversions which might assist with the management of the station wearing one hat and an antisocial behaviour hat, but can lead to major issues for disability staff, for disability users. And we've got a sight impaired counsellor who obviously led that petition actually against that particular move, because although she could, it wasn't a step-free access issue, there was a major detour issue for someone like her to have to navigate the route round to get to the station. So I think it's as much about, yes, absolutely, we need to make sure that we get all the stations accessible, but we then need to be absolutely mindful that when people are going to make changes to their access and egress arrangements from said stations, that they fully involve user groups. Otherwise, you could undo the good that's been done, even at the ones that where they are accessible currently. The other thing I'd also draw attention to is having a partner who can barely walk at the moment with a bad hip, that even those nominally accessible ones, if you're entering, say, Leeds station to get to 15B, where the whole train goes for, it's you might have a lift up to get you across to the platform, but it's a hell of a distance from accessing in. So it's not always just about accessibility, it's about getting through gates and getting from A to B. So I think the strategies, I welcome it, it's great. I think we need to move to get accessibility to those stations that don't have it, but we also need to protect it and continue to make improvements on those where there are, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. And there's further detail from Steve Curl on the station he was referring to on the chat bar. So I will come now to Heather, and after Heather, I'll come to Tracy Babin. Heather.
Thanks, John. Just really to comment that Tees Valley, we're already undertaking a programme of looking at potential station interventions. So anything that we're doing needs to be dovetailed with obviously what TFN are doing. I can only see one on the list, which is Billingham, and I know we have more that are not on that list, but just a comment further down the list. Obviously, the Darlington station upgrade will take into account the problem that it has at the Darlington main line station, and obviously Darlington, the North Road, the money that we're spending on the Rail Heritage Quarter because of the 2025 celebrations. Accessibility is important in that as well. So that's just a comment to make, that we're obviously already looking at this work, and I think it's important that we do work together on this. So thank you.
I can't hear you, John, but I assume I was next.
Yeah,
There you go. Thank you, John. Just to support the work that you've done on this, David, thank you. 57% of stations in West Yorkshire aren't up to standard. And as mayor, I stood on a manifesto which was absolutely about inclusivity. So, for example, in Batley, we have a station that not only doesn't have any access to the platform, it's all steps all the way. We also have a station that's out of town and doesn't even have a bus from the town centre up the steep cobbled hill to the station itself, the railway station itself. So there are many complications around this, that it's not just about accessibility in the station itself, it's about that integrated transport network, which is why it's so important that we get a speedy response from government on the rail integrated rail plan, so that I can then start planning and hopefully working with partners on the bus network that always that connect across West Yorkshire as well. So it's all connected. But I would just say 15 stations. I mean, it just feels a really slow progress. We must go faster. So thank you, Transport for the North, for the work you're doing on this. And if you need support from West Yorkshire, you need to pilot anything, you know, we're here because we've got a lot of work to do on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, for that offer. And let me now come to Andy Burnham, who's previously spoken on this very important issue at other meetings. Andy.
Thank you, Chair, and also to thank David for his work on this. Just to build on a point Heather made, I think it's very important that the paper reflects the local approaches that are already being adopted to this issue. And particularly, I think the paper will be strengthened, Chair, if it posed devolution of stations as one of the potential options here. Because actually, rather than us building yet more complex funding cases, as we know, we're not having a great deal of success with that at the moment. Maybe it's more about the North saying we will take on the challenge ourselves by taking control of these important community assets. And actually, we believe they are not being fully exploited as assets, to be honest, as they are full of potential that isn't being realised by the rail industry. And therefore, if they were devolved, we would be better at exploiting their commercial potential from a regeneration point of view, and that would release funding for the potential accessibility improvements as well. So I think the paper will be strengthened if it, in line with the GBR white paper, said early devolution, maybe not of all stations, but of priority stations within areas, either to combined authorities, transport authorities, or indeed to local authorities, would speed up. I mean, none of us can feel comfortable with the timetable that David outlines of this just taking the best part of the rest of this century. It has to proceed with much more urgency. And I think the devolution option is one that is about us taking on responsibility. And it's perhaps a message that will land better. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andy, and you did indeed make that point when we were discussing Great British Railways as a tangible step forward on a more regional and local structure. Steve Rotherham, please.
For information, really, Chair, in regard to Andy's point about the urgency of being able to tackle the inequality of inaccessibility for far too many of our residents across the north. Just to let you know that I was offered the opportunity of devolution of our stations by Chris Grayling when he was Secretary of State. So you can see how long it takes to try and get these things across the line. In fact, we've got an MOU that has been sitting for 19 months on the Secretary of State's table, waiting for them to sign an MOU, a non-legally binding memorandum of understanding. So yeah, I agree with the agency thing, but this is not the mechanism by which we will be able to fulfil all of the requirements of urgency.
Thank you, Steve. So I'll come back to David Worsley, and if David Hogarth has any comments, I'm sure he'll put them in as our Strategic Rail Director as well. I'll give you both the last word. But I think what I'm hearing from the board is strong support for this area of work, David, and thank you for all you and colleagues are doing on it. Very important points from Steve Curl about the value for money issue and how we address that, but also from Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham, can we connect this with our existing policy on further devolution, because this is one of the most obvious steps to devolve, which would just be beneficial to the overall objective of getting more relevant local action, as Heather was saying, as quickly as possible. So David, well, both David, starting with David Worsley, is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, just to say that the division of dealing with the stations into different prongs is really a question about information. And the thing is that what I'm saying is that for some stations, the information we have here at Transport for the North is enough to clearly make a case that something needs to be done and how it needs to be done. For other stations, we'll need more local knowledge, especially sort of with regards to integrating transport, like Tracy said. Some things you'll need knowledge of bus routes and walking routes in order to make the best possible case, and that's where we definitely have to work with local partners. So, and the value for money was more about the ones that we'll be looking at centrally. It's not about prioritising across the whole portfolio. But definitely, I think David Hogarth wanted to say a few words as well. I think.
David.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, thanks for all the comments, and it's great to get the support. I think the question here is, by collaborating across the North, can we add some value here and get more movement and get more stations done more quickly? I think the view is absolutely yes. I think adding the devolution angle will absolutely strengthen the case. Clearly, as Andy said, that doesn't apply everywhere. And I think that's why we also want to work with local members to strengthen their own local cases. There are opportunities to bring in local funding and put in local bids for access for all as well, as we've always done across the North. So we'll work with Steve and Cumbria County Council on the Staveley point to see if we can help there as well. So we'll move this to a kind of strategic case for investment and bring this back, picking up the points that members have made and carrying on working with local members to help strengthen their local cases as well.
Okay, thank you very much, David. So both Davids. So I'm going to put the proposal in paragraph 5.1 to the board for agreement with 2 amendments from the chair. The first is to particularly reinforce Heather Scott and Tracy Brabbin's points that we work very closely with local councils, which I know is always your intention, but I think we should minute it as the way we're going to move forward. And secondly, the proposal from Andy Burnham that we link this in order to get more momentum with our campaign for the devolution of stations to local control, wherever that is a feasible option. So with those 2 amendments to 5.1, do we have support from the board for the accessibility of stations strategy? Thank you, Andy, for the thumbs up. Heather, Lucy and others, thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we had a crack at item 10 at the beginning of the meeting at Louise's excellent suggestion. We're now coming back to it. We won't touch again on our frustrations on the IRP. We've agreed a course of action on that. I'd only say that there was a very good point on the chat bar from Jamie Driscoll that in the ministerial meeting we will seek that it would be very important that Treasury ministers were there, given that may be where we need to get our message very strongly across. And I'm sure that is a very sensible approach. But now we're going to come back, if you like, to 10B, which is the Manchester Recovery Task Force. I hope colleagues have had a chance in a busy meeting to at least scan the letter. And I'm going to, first of all, just give Tim the chance, having reflected on the letter you've received and having heard Andy Burnham and others concerned about the need for urgent action, just to guide us, Tim, on what you're proposing. And then I'll take questions and comments from board members, and I'll start with Hans Mundry. So Tim first and then Hans. Tim.
Thank you, John. So the letter, as you've probably all seen, highlights the passenger benefits of option B+. And the department clearly say they are committed to infrastructure improvements and will announce them soon, but not before a decision is needed on the option B+. So really it's asking here for a short-term decision in parallel with the government still moving forward on infrastructure improvements. Where does it really leave us? Well, not in a position to agree the timetable change. I think that's clear from the Rail North Committee. But of course, the DfT are not prepared to agree the sort of COVID timetable moving across to a B+. So we have an impasse and the timetable potentially we are seeing may have to remain as a COVID timetable, which of course will have a considerable effect on the travelling public. In effect, what that timetable B+ is indicating that previous services pre-COVID, So direct services between South Yorkshire and Manchester Airport still are not coming in on the timetable change that's been discussed for December. That's the B plus timetable change, and also some other services that we've been working with the department on are still being discussed. That's the sort of cross Warrington ones. I think where I'm coming to is that ultimately need a meeting with the minister to have that discussion with them as to how we move forward. I think my sort of word of wisdom may be that I still think we should continue on with the B plus timetable in terms of the work that's going on in the background while we urgently seek that meeting with the minister and his availability. So that's where we are, John. Ultimately happy to take any questions, but I don't think it's as positive as it could have been.
No, indeed not. Okay, I've got 4 hands up so far, so let's have some counsel from the board. I'm going to start with Hans Mundry, and after Hans, I'll come to Steve Rotherham. Hans.
Yes, thanks, John. I think it looks like we're being forced into a situation where none of us wanted to be. And it's a question of what Warrington's a big loser in the B plus proposal. But there again is the long-term benefit, and it comes down to the infrastructure timetable. So they give us times for everything other than when they're going to start work on the infrastructure. And I think that's got to be when we have the meeting with a minister. I think we do need to move forward. I think we could live with it for a short period of time, depending on the infrastructure starting work. So the consultation, I think the infrastructure timetable with definite times needs to be put in place before the consultation starts on B plus. So we do know what we're going to get, when we're going to get it, and then we can consult. And I think it's easy to talk to our citizens saying we've got a timescale for how long you'd have to put up with this poor service. I think we definitely need to have that. I think the letter's not given us options to go back and get sort of some sort of conclusions from first. I think the meeting with the minister is important to do it, but there again we can write back to them saying actually we can go forward with B plus. It's not helpful. It's not what we'd like to do, but as a sign of consultation and negotiation. But we do need to have the infrastructure timescales nailed down, and so if we can actually make it workable.
Thank you, Hans. That's very helpful. Steve, and after Steve, I'll come to Dan.
Yeah, just to support Hans first of all, but I'll leave the arguments, Chair, on the options to other people. Can I just talk about tone? It is, for me, one of the most inflammatory and provocative letters from government that I think I've had the misfortune to read in recent times. Basically, and I'll just see if I can click on my screen to get the exact part of the letter, but it's, here we go. So it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down and a couple of lines in, and it says where it will be vital for local leaders share the ownership of and responsibility for decision making. Well, of course, we all do that. That's what we do. We are accountable and do that. And that includes difficult decisions like this one, where there's no perfect option, as well as easy decisions that get everyone a round of applause. Basically, this is not about sharing ownership and responsibility. This is about devolving blame. And we have to be very, very careful that what will happen in the future is that any disruption that's caused will be directly attributable to a decision that we take today and the recommendations that we make to yourself and therefore via government. I think this is a very cynical attempt at the government saying in the future, nothing to do with me. We remember the Grayling stuff about being blindsided. We were all privy to all of that, and then trying to share that round. And it's genuinely really disappointing. When myself and Andy Burnham and others met with the Prime Minister, he said he understood what we are responsible for. He wanted to give us further powers. He said, and with that comes accountability. And we said, yes, we 100% accept that. But what we're not going to do is be given a fait accompli, basically, and then be blamed for the lack of opportunity.
Thank you, Steve. Point well made. Dan Jarvis, and then I'll come to Andy Burnham.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I completely agree with the way that Steve has just characterised this letter. It is an extraordinary piece of correspondence, not least in its timing. And I think very worryingly, what it does, for me anyway, is undermine the government's commitment to work constructively with us in the North. And I think that is a very serious and worrying development. Given the concerns that we've previously expressed, both as a Rail North Committee and as a TFN board, both about the process and the outcomes, and the conditions that we, in my view, quite reasonably attached at a recent meeting to making progress, I can't see how we could possibly accept either of the two options as they've been identified in this letter, given that they are both suboptimal. However, I do think that we need to continue to explore every avenue to try and resolve this matter, because it's in our shared interest to do so. Therefore, I think that we should do two things. The first is just to clarify the governance around the decision-making process here, because primarily this has been a matter which has been discussed at the Rail North Committee. So I think we just need to sort of determine who's responsible ultimately for determining how we respond. But I also, picking up on the point that Tim made earlier, I do think that we need an urgent meeting with the Minister or the Secretary of State, by which I mean this week, to discuss how we can make progress, because neither of the options as they're identified are remotely palatable to me. I couldn't support them, but I do think that we need to strain every sinew to try and find a way of moving forward. So an urgent meeting, I think, is probably the only option that we have left to us.
Thank you, Dan. Andy.
Well, thanks, Chair, and thank you for facilitating this discussion today. I agree with others. It's a problematic, unnecessarily combative letter. I think a couple of things, just quick observations. Firstly, it kind of has no recognition of the long history here. It's as if we're being unreasonable talking about infrastructure. I think it uses the phrase changing the subject to infrastructure at one point, and we've never changed it. We've always talked about infrastructure. We've never, because the timetable is dependent on the infrastructure, and the failure to prioritise infrastructure is why we got into the mess in 2018. So it's a fairly extraordinary statement for the Minister to sort of suggest that changing the subject to infrastructure. So that's one. I mean, the history of it just, you know, is obviously absent, but also the kind of sense that we should be grateful for option B+. I think, you know, for Dan, it's a slightly problematic notion, you know, that it's more reliable and so many, you know, all these enhancements and saving of 1,700. Yeah, it's almost promoting B+ as a good result for us, and therefore it's a dangerous thing, as Steve Rotherham was saying, for us to in any way, because it will go down badly with the communities that are affected here. So it is a Hobson's choice. I heard what Dan said. I mean, I don't know whether, given the time that we're in now, whether we say option B+ is the least worst, but we don't formally support either. But if you force us to indicate a preference, then it's B+. But, you know, Hans's point was a good one, I think. You know, if the government was to kind of maybe step outside of the combative mode, urgently conclude its infrastructure considerations, then, as Hans was saying, at least we'd be consulting with an exit route that we could point our public to, and therefore we wouldn't end up in a sort of as much negativity as we might otherwise do. You know, the solving of the infrastructure actually will get the solution a better hearing in a consultation than if it's an open-ended, reduced timetable. So I'll finish on this point, Chair, because it's quite an important one. I think it's this point about constant references to leadership and, you know, wanting rounds of applause for everything we do. I think we did show leadership through the timetable debacle, and I think the department needs to, and the Minister needs to be reminded of that. But I don't think we can leave this notion hanging that we just want, you know, leadership does mean leadership. Well, I remember being at this board accepting that my own rail service would have to disappear from the rail timetable because we needed to remove services through central Manchester, the Transport for Wales service. Well, I would say that's a fair example of leadership, given the passengers who I go on that train with will all know, would all hold me to account for that. But so did other leaders, and mayors. We accepted reductions to the timetable to make this thing work. So the idea that we've not been prepared to do that, and when it comes to capital leadership, we drove the consideration of the capital issues as that being the ultimate solution to these problems. But we've never been presented by the department with a choice, a realistic choice, and a trade-off as to how we might get a workable solution that we can all sign up to. So leadership for us in this moment in time, in the absence of being given solutions on infrastructure, is to say that our residents won't accept the age-old failure to prioritise the north. That is leadership in the scenario where the department is not giving us infrastructure options. Leadership is to say, we will not put up with the same old, you just will have to make do with what you've got. Leadership is to say we've been promised better from that, and we're going to take a stand to get that. So it's a really problematic letter, I think, John. I don't know whether people want to go with the least worst or whether they want to go with Dan's option of seeking an urgent meeting. I would do either, but I find it really disappointing that we're in this position, and it's a forerunner of the bigger issues that we were talking about earlier at the start of the meeting, and all of this, I think, does not bode well right now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Tracy, please, and then I'll come to Peter Kennan.
Thank you. I just want to support what my colleagues, the other mayors, have been saying. One thing for me, and in trying to set up this strategic West Yorkshire strategic partnership, going forward, it is about working together. And in the letter, Chris mentions that what he wants is as a service that is reliable. And surely our citizens want that. Well, yes, this is why we're here, because we want a reliable service that is green and cost effective, all the things everyone wants. But I just think that the tone of the letter feels quite out of step with the little I know the minister, so I'm quite surprised at that tone, but very happy to support either meeting with the minister or whatever other colleagues more impacted decide upon. But certainly trying to set up this strategic relationship with government, I'm hoping going forward that we don't hit these roadblocks where there's the lack of understanding that we're absolutely all want the same for our citizens, which is a decent rail service that we were promised.
Indeed, Tracy, indeed. Peter Kennan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm stunned by the letter, to be fair. You never win a war by digging a trench. And this is just digging a trench. I mean, it's quite shocking, really. And all I could suggest is that we follow up what Dan has just said, which is that you invite dialogue. You have to continue to invite dialogue in discussion and compromise. You cannot win. It's not strong leadership to bully. It's not. You have to have a resolution at some point. And clearly, we in the north have a very strong case. So I can only suggest that there is some further dialogue, as Dan suggested.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think I've captured everybody who's wishing to contribute at this point. Yes. So this is really tricky, isn't it? And the letter has not helped a resolution. But let me try and suggest a way forward then, based on what board members have said. So starting with Hans Mundry's very helpful contribution, I suggest we continue to strive for a resolution. We just got to keep trying, however difficult it is. And the point we need to continue to make very, very strongly is just to reiterate the position that came out of the Rail North Committee, that acquiescing in a least worst option of timetable changes in the short term must go hand in hand with a commitment to infrastructure improvements. And it's in everybody's interest that those two positions are in lockstep. It's as much in central government's interest as it is in the interests of northern leaders, both civic and business. And an urgent meeting with Chris Heaton-Harris in order to reiterate that point and try to pull back from a divisive position and rally round the common ground of a pragmatic solution. I think that's where Hans and Dan were coming from. Now, that may not work. So what is our position? And clearly at the end of the day, the government of the day will make their own decisions, but this board as a statutory board is entitled to maintain its position. So if those final efforts to find common ground on the basis of the lockstep of service changes in the short term with commitments to real infrastructure improvements to resolve the problem are not successful, then I think this board is saying there may be a least worst option, but it's not a least worst option that this board is going to sign up to in the absence of the commitment to infrastructure improvements. And so something may happen, but this board does not have to choose to be associated with something that it believes is not acceptable. And that's really the point that Steve Rotherham and Andy were making about accountability. I then come to the consequence of that, which is Dan's question about governance. We've worked on the basis over the last couple of years since the debacle on the timetable issue of empowering the Rail North Committee as a committee of this board to take action on rail service matters, whilst always reporting to the board, of course, as it always has done under Liam's excellent chairmanship. And I think this is an issue, as Andy said, of such supreme importance and precedence that it needs the board absolutely behind it. So I would suggest, Dan, the answer to your very good question is that the board and the Rail North Committee should work jointly on this. And I think in the urgency of time, action needs taking now. What in fact should happen is that the Chief Executive should work with those members who have been most active on the Rail North Committee as a small inner group of board members to exercise the board mandate. And a meeting with Chris Heaton-Harris should therefore involve Tim and Martin alongside those leading members who would have already expressed a view and have been very active in this. So point one, we seek an urgent meeting to find that common ground and to say it's in everybody's interest that the least worst option on timetable is directly associated with commitments on infrastructure. Two, that this board does not change its position on what it will not accept. And three, that the Chief Executive moves forward with a small group of leading members. That, I think, pulls together the themes from what members and indeed yourself have said, Tim. Before I put that to the board for a board mandate, Tim, can I give you the final word? Give us your counsel as interim CEO. Can you live with that board mandate?
I can live with that board mandate, but I want to add something else to it, that we continue on with the work in terms of developing that B+ timetable, because even if at the end of the day we have to accept that, if we don't carry on with it now, we will have to live with the COVID-19 timetable, and that is not positive for the travelling public. There are increases in resilience and reliability in the services. So I would like that added as a fourth one for the board. And I think the other piece is rail infrastructure does take a long time to get designed and developed and built. And we really want to move these matters on so we can get that travelling public the capacity it needs to be able to run those longer trains, more trains, so we can get people out of their cars. Ultimately, I think we need to show willing here. This is a battle. It is not the war. The war is getting that investment here in the north of England And I think that is really, really important. We have made some positive strides, but ultimately we want to see the investment coming here in the north of England through that IRP, which does set a different tone potentially. What does that document say in relation to some of this work as well? That could have quite an impact, and we don't know that yet. So I think carrying on is really important. But of course, the other three pieces of that mandate, I'm happy to execute.
Okay, well, from my point of view, I can see that staff work, simply dealing with options, is not inconsistent with the really strong and determined board mandate. It's the board mandate that ministers will see. So there's an addition there from Tim in the proposal I've made, which I think is perfectly consistent. Andy, please.
Apologies, Chair, for wanting to come back in. I hear what Tim is saying, but I think we've got to be careful not to just get subsumed into the collaborative process, and there'll be another seminar, and I just think we need to keep the clarity in what we're saying. And to try and help the board, John, I just thought I'd come back in to see if we can get an explicit request here as part of this, rather than a war of words, as people are saying, and it getting. It's what I said before about control period 6 is relevant, isn't it? We should be absolutely explicit in saying what is the commitment to Central Manchester from control period 6, because there is a pipeline expected anytime soon. And I think Hans made the key points. I think if there's a timetable, date, project, this board will have then moved the issue forward, and this is what we're trying to do, isn't it? Rather than sort of going on with sort of half promises and all the rest of it. So I think the meeting with the minister should absolutely, if they can't give us a firm commitment on control period 6, it is because nothing is coming in control period 6. And if that is the reality, then I think we then need to sort of judge how we would justify that to our residents, because this is, as I think we've said before, the only piece I think of congested rail infrastructure in the country. For it to have no priority in the current control period it just couldn't be acceptable to this board, I don't think, not just to Manchester but to anybody. So that, I think, let's try and take a win, if you like, as opposed to sort of asking for things that we'll end up just trading words. What is the control period 6 intervention? And I think that's where we should really put the government on the spot, if that helps.
That's really helpful, Andy. So I'm going to re-summarise then my proposal from the chair, having listened to the board members, that the board mandate remains the same, that we cannot agree to the least worst option on timetable changes without a real commitment on infrastructure, that we hone that down to the minimum we're looking for is an explicit commitment for infrastructure action in CP6, that we meet with Chris Heaton-Harris to argue that it's in everybody's interests that these two move forward in lockstep, and there's a win-win there for us all, that the office is entitled to continue lower level work on the timetable, but not in any way that would give any signal that the board mandate is being weakened or is weakening. And I think that, Tim, is exactly what you meant. So that, and that a small delegation of those members most actively involved with the Chief Executive meet with Chris Heaton-Harris as soon as possible to try to get a good solution here, or the least worst solution. That is the proposal I'm making from the chair. Does that have the support of the board? Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Louise, Steve, and others. We will proceed on that basis, and obviously Tim, and from next week, Martin, will be in quick contact with members to take this forward in what is, as we know, a very difficult period in getting hold of people when people understandably have family holiday commitments, but we'll do the very best we can. I propose to leave this item there. Clearly, that as an urgent subset of integrated rail plan as the bigger long-term issue, the prize is enormous. The prize for the North of our transformational vision is enormous. We are deeply frustrated about the long period of not having the news we look for on investment, but we will continue on both to redouble our efforts to be an effective partner to get a good and effective result. At that point then, let me move to item 11. And this just records for the minutes that at the close of this meeting, I will hand over the chair to Louise Gittings, who will be acting chair pending the recruitment of a new independent chair as agreed at the June meeting. So it falls to me to wish Louise, wish you very well in kindly picking up that gauntlet at a really exciting time in the evolving history of transport for the North, not without its challenges, but those are the battles worth fighting. And again, to thank Tim for his service as interim chair, and then particularly to wish Martin well. He'll be in post from Monday of next week, and to wish Martin well as chairman. Can I conclude my chairmanship then by thanking you all for your support over the almost 6 years we've been proceeding with these matters. I've once or twice, and I'm not a cricket player, so forgive those if this is not a good cricket analogy, but it's the one in my mind. TFN at the moment feels to me like a county cricket match where we're just coming off the pitch for lunch at the end of the first innings. It's been my privilege and pleasure to chair TFN through the first innings. And during that innings, I think we have, from a standing start, from an organisation which did not exist, we have created an organisation which is now, and this today's meeting has illustrated this, an effective, articulate voice for civic and business leadership across the north of England. Behind that voice from the leaders lies an organisation which is providing us with the expert evidence for that transformational vision, an economically driven transformational vision, which is ultimately about enabling our northern citizens whom we serve to live their aspirations and their dreams by having the opportunity to get the jobs they want and do the leisure they want across the north, which is much better connected. Now, I would have liked during my chairmanship to have got even further. I would have liked diggers on the ground, to use that old hackneyed phrase. But at the end of the first innings, I think the transformational case is really strong. And I think as a statutory body with some teeth, more teeth we would like, but with some teeth, TFN is well positioned, notwithstanding the frustrations, under new leadership from the chair and the CEO in the second innings of the county cricket match to actually get that investment across the line. And I look forward as a Northern citizen and continuing as president of the Northern Transport Acceleration Council to seeing the progress you make. So I'd just like to thank you all and extend my very best wishes for the future progress of this very important project. And I'll stop there.
John, do you mind if I just say something very briefly? Because I've been on this journey with you and Steve and others since, and others have joined along the way. To use your analogy, at the end of our first innings, we've certainly shown we can dig in behind you in terms of not collapsing. We've certainly faced some hostile bowling at times from various quarters, but that's not thrown us off course. So we've stood our ground definitely. I won't labour the analogy much further, but you have chaired everything fairly and accurately in that you've always reflected our voice. And although we have been demanding at times, it's because we need to be demanding now for the north of England. The north of England has an opportunity to change its transport system, but we really can't at this moment in time accept second best for our residents. And that's why we have voiced our feelings as we do, and you have faithfully then taken those and turned them into constructive proposals back to government. So I hope I'm speaking on behalf of other board members in thanking you for the leadership that you've given to transport for the north, and hopefully you've made a laid a platform for a test-winning second innings coming soon. But thank you very much on behalf of us all, John.
Thank you very much, Andy. That's much appreciated. Well, I'm not one for prolonged farewells, so I think we should leave it there, colleagues, and leave it to Louise to pick this up, and then you'll have your annual meeting with appropriate elections in due course. So I'll close the meeting there and hope to see you in even happier times when the North is even better connected. And thank you and goodbye.
Oh.
Well, I don't know what happened then, but unfortunately, I just glitched out there. So I think it was just really just to say, John, thank you very much for all the work you have done for us. And it's been a pleasure working with you. And for us, I think, really important that we move forward now in a positive way. OK, thank you very much. I think that's the end of the meeting.